So today at ET Now or the Times Network, we want to start a new debate and a new mission. The India revival debate. Now the lockdown has been a resounding success on the medical grounds. But the lockdown with each passing day is also murdering the economy. The lockdown, we know, has frozen the economic activity and also will have a huge impact on job losses, will stroke up the unemployment rate higher, and will have a clear cascading impact on how the cash flow, credit, and the entire credit of the economy is going to move. So while lockdown has been a resounding success to control the virus is showing signs of plateauing out. So on the medical ground, it is a success. But can India, given the global backdrop and given the fiscal and the financial position of the country and of the government, can we afford a lockdown? So next couple of days we would debate, deliberate, discuss, and also argue that can India really afford a lockdown? Is it time to lift the lockdown completely or partially? What has been and what will be the economic cost of this lockdown? What the government needs to do in order to revive and stroke the economy? Do they have the ability or the financial muscle to really ensure that at a time when global trade is contracting and local GDP is contracting, can they really do something out of box? Is it time to come together and now, like we acted on the medical front, act together to request the government to remove the lockdown or make a case for a partial removal of lockdown? So let me establish the case here with some hard data. The economy has taken a knock. Again, these are estimates of about 3 lakh crore to 4 lakh crore on a daily basis. 34 days of lockdown have resulted in a GDP loss of anywhere between 11 lakh crore to about 13.5 lakh crore. Lockdown beyond 40 days is going to contract the economy. And even though India on paper today is one of the fastest growing economy in the world, or one of the fastest growing economy in the world, that is not a consolation considering the job losses and the unemployment which we could be staring at. The loss in income in last 34 days is as high as 3.4 lakh crore, and potential job losses are pegged to be nearly 100 million. 25% of MSCs which face closure if lockdown goes beyond 4 weeks, and 43% will have to shut shop if the lockdown extends beyond 8 weeks. This is data which we've got from the All India Manufacturing Association. Now, let's look at the state-wise split. Maharashtra accounts for 15% of India's GDP, Tamil Nadu 8.5%, Delhi 4%, Telangana 4.5%. The number for Rajasthan stands at 5%, and for Uttar Pradesh, it is 8%. Some of the big industries in Maharashtra, I'll be very quick here, includes manufacturing, auto, movies, stroke cinema, along with textiles. Tamil Nadu, again, it's autos, pharma, Karnataka autos, Uttar Pradesh agricultural and textile. So I'm going to take the whole India revival debate forward now. We've got Mr. S.K. Saraf of FIEO, and we've got Mr. Amit Kapoor to give us a better understanding of how India is prepared to really come out of this economic slump. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Kapoor, and my question is very simple and straightforward. Can India afford a complete or a partial lockdown given the fragile state of the economy?
So this is a great question, in terms of like whether India can afford a complete lockdown or not. I think what the country did was exceedingly exceptional and a very courageous decision to actually get into a lockdown. But now, given what we have actually been able to do with the pandemic in terms of like being able to slow down the curve, we are actually plateauing the rate of infection. It makes a lot of sense to get out of the lockdown now. The only question here is going to be that I would suspect that we should go for a partial lifting of the lockdown. We should not really go to the hotspots or open up the hotspots. Because if we are opening up the hotspots and the infection flow happens to be crazy, the number of deaths that we could look at or the number of infections we can look at are going to be stunning. So after a certain time, I think we will have to continue with a partial lockdown for at least another 4 to 6 weeks. But open up the hotspot. Don't open up the hotspots. Let the non-hotspots actually open up. Let the economy open up there, and let the activity start happening. But having said that, I think there would be certain set of principles that we will have to take care of in terms of like how people work. So the conditions for work will have to change. We will have to really make sure that the set of people who are coming into the factories, the social distancing norms are actually met, and so on and so forth. So this becomes important for us to do it. In terms of an economic impact, of course, the economic impact has been there, but the question is, it was about life and livelihoods. I think the government did a great job of maintaining the life here. It was just about a social aspect that we have to take care of. But now going into the economic thing, India can actually quickly jump up in terms of the slowdown that we've actually faced. I would suspect that it would take us close to about 6 to 12 months to really come back up to full steam if we just remove the lockdown now and remove the complete lockdown from the hotspots as well in the coming 4 weeks.
Mr. Saraf, you present FIEO, a body which represents exporters. Yes. Some would argue that Indian exports last year were not that great, and this year, because of the lockdown, bad has become worse.
Yes. Yes, that is true. You see, the orders are cancelled, payments are not coming, there is no cash flow with the exporters, there is no money left to restart the business. We are almost in a condition like a startup. Any further lockdown, total lockdown like this, will only increase our difficulties exponentially. It will not increase pro rata. It will be far beyond than pro rata. Now the issue is whether we will be able to revive the economy in the near future. My take is at least it will take about 6 to 8 months before we could see any real benefits coming up. I think the government needs to really do a hard thinking about the economy, whether they really need the economy. At the moment, we have absolutely no indications from the government that any kind of economic package would be there, or whether any kind of economic help will be there to revive this sad state of affairs. You see, the finance minister announced a package of 170 lakh crores, out of which whatever was given in terms of provident fund, there were such conditions attached that not hardly very few companies could get benefit. Similarly, giving away 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees per month for 3 months or so is not going to be of any help, because how much can you feed in 1,000 or 2,000 rupees few days? But what is required to be done is to give jobs to the people. Unless you give jobs, the situation will be bad, and I am agreeing with my colleague Anilji that we need to gradually open up the economy. We simply can't do it like an electric switch that we put it on and we put it off. We should have closed down also gradually. We should now open up gradually. So immediately, I think even without waiting for the 3rd of May, gradual opening up is a need of an hour. I just read the report of the Prime Minister, the Chief Minister meeting yesterday, and I'm glad that most of the Chief Minister also agreed that gradual opening of economy is required. You see, the most important thing at the moment, you have given certain figures of losses that we would suffer due to lockdown. But let me tell you that if we were to open up the economy, if we were to give it some push, we would need more than the slogans. We would need actual economic initiatives, bold economic initiatives. If our government can take such bold measures like abrogation of the Article 370 or passing CAA, which were really bold political steps. Similarly, they should go beyond politics, beyond everything else, and come up with grassroots level reforms where there is ease of doing business.
I'm going to also get a view from Dr. Raghuram Rajan. ET now spoke to Dr. Raghuram Rajan, and let's hear out what Dr. Raghuram Rajan has to say about the economic lockdown.
It's not a stark choice, saving lives or saving livelihoods. You have to actually do both. And that means that on the one hand, you can't remain in lockdown forever. That would be focusing only on saving lives. But in the process, if people don't have livelihoods, you may also impact their lives. And we don't have distribution systems that reach everybody in India, especially the very needy, the very poor. Often they're left out of the distribution system. So we have to make a trade-off where we focus on both, but try and do a little bit of both at the same time. What that means is that we have to think about a staggered restarting of the economy, start first with the areas where it's least vulnerable, and then move to the areas where it's most vulnerable. But of course, what this means is an enormous amount of administration goes into the reopening, perhaps even more than fighting the disease.
IMF Chief Economist Geeta Gopinathan and her thoughts to the Times Network. This is the worst financial crisis since 1930s. The government will need to provide unprecedented support. Uday Kotak also, he's giving a medical example. I'm going to just read off his latest tweet. Coronavirus death per million, India has outperformed. Furthermore, our daily numbers are not sharply spiking despite increased testing. Lockdown has been a medical success. Time for now to focus on a livelihood. So the intention now, or the post the medical success, it's time now to shift back to the economy. That's the point I guess we are arguing and we are debating. The point I'm simply trying to make here is that a car has four wheels. One is the medical emergency. Second is what we do in terms of maintaining social distancing. Third is the economy. And for economy to function well, you need the transaction or the economic activity to start. Otherwise, things will come to a grinding stall. India cannot afford a lockdown further because A, we don't have ability like other developed countries to spend and to splurge, and B, given that we are still dependent on foreign capital, I guess it is important to understand that foreign capital will only be coming when they get a sense that the economic activity has started normalizing. So Amit, I go back to that point once again. One, ideology, you agree with us that the lockdown needs to be lifted. Now, whether it's a partial lift or whether it's a complete lift off, the lockdown now needs to be lifted. But Amit, what can the government do? We know the state of finances. The GST collection has dropped completely. It would be difficult for government to go ahead with divestment of Air India and BPCL. What are the options for the government? While everybody is of the view, Amit, that government should bail out just about every salaried class person, poorest of the poor, important sectors like tourism and airline, the reality is that everybody wants something, very few will get something.
So, again, a very important question for the government to answer as to what are the set of people we should be supporting. If you look at any country in the world, 97% of the economy is effectively driven by medium and small scale enterprises. So, and they are the set of people who create jobs or give jobs as well. So this is where it becomes exceedingly important that the government creates an impetus or gives an impetus to the MSME sector. And when I have actually said that, there are one or two things that we need to be mindful of. One is that you're talking about a stimulus that has to be given. The stimulus that has been given until now is fairly minimal. I think the government is already working on it. And as I understand, the stimulus will have to move towards close to about 5 to 6% of the GDP. The government will have to understand that this is a wartime economy that we are really talking about. It was a war against COVID or a virus or whatever. So we have to behave like a wartime situation. Wherein we say that, okay, we will not have to look at the fiscal deficit targets. We can actually breach that target as we are going along. Because if you really don't do that, it can actually have a resounding effect or a stunning effect and a negative effect on how the economy goes forward. So we will have to support the MSMEs. In fact, there will actually have to be firms as well. If you really look at, say, a large set of MSMEs are effectively franchisee stores as well. So they will have to get supported by their firms itself or the large set of firms. Today, what I'm seeing is that these firms are not supporting. So corporate actually will also have to come in between to really follow their capitalistic dharma. Like, it is not about just exploiting. It is just not about profitability. You should work with enterprises in the times of need. And that is what will have to be moving forward as we really look at things. And then, of course, if you really look at the timelines here, I think the timelines are fairly in favor of India. There are some positives that are going to happen because of this lockdown as we move forward, because the global redefinition or realignment of global value chains is going to happen. And this is where India can actually look at a whole huge positive. But once we open up here, the investments can actually happen, and investments will happen very fairly quickly, because companies will actually look at resilient, adaptive value chains, and MSME sector can actually pick it up.
Okay. I'm just going to, bring to everyone's attention 3 large sectors and their contribution to GDP, and what is the average employment which these 3 sectors currently are creating. Auto and auto components. 9% of GDP contribution is coming only from auto and auto components. I'm talking about the entire supply chain, which includes dealers and, of course, the transportation sector. They employ nearly 40 million people. Nearly 10% of the GDP is coming from tourism and aviation. They employ 42 million people. Retail. A part of retail, and especially organized retail, has got hit. The Kirana Wala surely has made a comeback, but just to establish, both directly and indirectly, it accounts for about 10% of the GDP, employs about 40 million people. Samit, before we wrap, I guess we are raising 3 questions. First, is it time to lift the lockdown, and can the economy afford another lockdown? You would agree with the analysis when we say that India cannot afford another lockdown. Second question, Amit, how should the lockdown be lifted? And your thoughts are that it could be partial, it could be gradual, but the lockdown needs to be lifted. But the third question, Amit, which we've not answered, and I'll take closing comments from you before we wrap this one. How much time will it take for economy to recover? Will it be V-shape? Will it be W-shape? Or will it be L-shape, which is that we fall down and we remain flat for next couple of quarters?
This is again like a question in terms of like how the economy goes up. From my perspective, I'm fairly confident the economy will start moving up in terms of, say, the next 6 to 12 months itself. It is not going to be a long recovery. It is going to be a recovery which is going to be fairly steep as we actually go along. In fact, it is going to be akin to something like what happened in the 1980s and the 1918 and 1920 after the Spanish flu pandemic. What you saw was the roaring 20s at that point in time. Everybody is saying that, okay, now we are actually seeing the worst of the depression or whatever, but you actually followed it up with the best growth rates in the world. The Spanish flu saw an amazing growth rate. After the depression, there were amazing growth rates. And that is what we are actually going to be looking at. Today, we have far more better understanding of how economies operate. So what I would actually suspect is that it would actually last for close to about 6 months of a slowdown, and then we will start going up. So it is definitively going to be a U-shaped recovery. It is not an elongated cycle that we are going to actually have an impact. There is also something very important that India is fairly demand-driven from a domestic point of view. So the local demand will start improving and starting going up. And if the impetus is there in place, you are not really going to see that amazing set of job losses. You will actually see incomes coming back again. Even if they are not actually at a similar level, we might see some drop of about 10% or whatever. But you will start seeing consumption happening from the internal population as well. So exports, of course, will actually take time, but there is a huge positive in terms of how exports will shape up, because India is actually going to be sitting at a cusp of an opportunity, which is absolutely great. But last but not the least, I must actually give an example of how India has actually used this lockdown from a positive point of view. Look at the personal protective equipment that is actually being manufactured in India. So what the government has actually done is they've understood that there are severe issues with the ecosystem that was there. You were not able to make personal protective equipment. They worked very hard to create an ecosystem. And now we suddenly see that India is possibly developing a cluster for personal protective equipment. So we have also seen that in the time of crisis, India can actually move up and move up fairly well. So all in all, I'm fairly positive. Will take about 6 to 12 months, but a U-shaped recovery.
Well, so viewers, our whole India revival debate is simply mounted on very simple assumptions, which is that if the lockdown is extended, Indian economy will, which already had a bad 2019 and we were hoping for a recovery is going to get weakened further, which is bad could get worse. The current government finances are not that strong that they can really stimulate the economy, unlike other developed economies, very strongly. And the longer the lockdown will extend, slower will be the economic activity. We already know that there is a credit squeeze which has started. Banks are not lending, confidence is not there, mutual fund schemes are folding up, and that is going to be a huge challenge. What we need to see now that after the resounding success of lockdown on the medical front, the government should consider partially or lifting the lockdown so that the economy revives. We should never waste a crisis, and in this crisis, global liquidity has become abundant. Oil prices have collapsed. We are in a much stronger place in terms of the medical news. So all in all, if the economic activity picks up, the chances of India emerging as stronger and bigger, I think, are very high. TCS, IT companies are doing their bit by migrating graduate jobs to work from home. But we need to think about the unskilled, the raw, the immigrant laborers and graduates who do not have the talent, ability or the skill to work from home. What we don't want to see is that at a time when things are collapsing, a lockdown should really push us further down in some kind of an economic downtrend. So these are some of the thoughts, and we will stay with this whole debate for next couple of days. We are analyzing facts, we would be debating, we would be arguing with experts like Amit and Mr. Saraf, giving you a realistic picture of the economy, and the whole proposition is centered around one simple fact. The lockdown has been a medical success, but for the economy, is lockdown going to hurt? And it's going to hurt very badly. I'm going to take a break with the news that markets meanwhile are looking okay, and there is definitely a comeback which is there in some of the NBFC stocks. Gentlemen, appreciate your time and thank you for joining us.